Imagine being publicly humiliated just for being a Trump. How would you react? Watch as Barron Trump faces a relentless liberal activist. His unexpected response leaves everyone stunned. New York bustled as usual. People rushing through their daily routines, some laughing with friends, while others gathered in a small cafe, gripping their morning coffee and venting about how Trump's policies had damaged the country. Then the atmosphere shifted. Conversations died down. Eyes subtly darted toward the entrance as a tall, composed figure stepped inside. His sharp features, familiar posture, and effortless confidence revealed his identity before anyone could even whisper it. It was Barron Trump. The murmurs started, low at first, then spreading like wildfire. A woman near the counter leaned in toward her friend, whispering, "Is that really him?" Another patron, pretending to scroll through his phone, angled the camera for a discreet shot. Others exchanged skeptical glances, wondering why he was here, alone, without a security team in sight. Then, a voice cut through the growing whispers, loud, direct, and filled with contempt. "Guess even Trump's kid thinks he can just waltz in anywhere like he owns the place." The room tensed. Heads turned toward a woman standing near the counter, her arms crossed, eyes locked on Barron. Her words hung in the air, daring someone to respond. Barron, already halfway to the counter, didn't react right away. Instead, he kept his posture relaxed, his expression unreadable. The waitress, sensing the rising tension, hesitated before stepping forward. "What would you like to have, sir?" "Just a coffee," Barron said, offering a polite smile. No extravagant order, no demands, nothing to suggest he was different from anyone else. But no matter how unassuming he tried to be, the moment had already been tainted. The woman scoffed. "Must be nice, huh? Sipping lattes while the rest of us deal with the mess your family made." People exchanged glances, some intrigued, others unsure. The usual online outrage had spilled into reality, and now all eyes were on Barron. He could feel the weight of the stares, sharp, judgmental, filled with unspoken resentment. Yet he remained composed, calmly reaching for his cup as the real confrontation loomed just ahead. Meanwhile, the woman with determination stepped forward, her posture making her intentions clear. And for the first time, the weight of his last name settled heavy on Barron's shoulders. Barron took another slow sip of his coffee, his grip steady, but his mind racing. He had expected hostility, but not this soon, not this direct. Still, engaging in a heated debate wouldn't do any good. It would only add fuel to the fire, and the last thing he wanted was to create a spectacle that could cause problems for his father. The woman didn't care for Barron's silence. She closed the distance, her presence looming over the table. Her tone was sharp, laced with resentment. "Tell me, Trump Tower isn't enough for you guys? Now you've set your sights on the whole country." Barron met her gaze. No anger, no reaction. Just a calm, measured look. A silent answer, one that said louder than words, "I'm not taking the bait." But the woman wasn't done. She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Why don't you guys stick to your reality show antics? You fit in better there. I actually liked Trump in WWE, especially when he got chokeslammed. That was a real show." For Barron, this wasn't just criticism. It was a personal insult, a deliberate provocation. He clenched his jaw, his father's words echoing in his mind. Never let them drag you into a fight. But this was more than just politics. A tense silence gripped the cafe. Eyes darted between Barron and the woman, anticipation thick in the air. Some patrons shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what would happen next. Others watched with barely concealed smirks, eager to see how the young Trump would respond. The waitress froze mid-step, sensing the situation escalating. Seeing the smirks and approving nods from the audience, the woman grew bolder. Emboldened by their reaction, she leaned in closer, her words dripping with malice. "You say MAGA, but maybe we should start by deporting you first. Aren't you an immigrant?" This wasn't just an insult. It was an attack on everything the Trump family had stood for. The sacrifices, the policies, the fight to rebuild the nation. It was a dismissal of everything his father had worked for. Barron's grip tightened around his cup. For a split second, rage surged through him. A single thought crossed his mind. Smash it. Let her know he crossed the line. But then another thought followed. If I react like her, what's the difference between us? Instead, he exhaled slowly and met the woman's glare with unwavering composure. His response was calm, measured, sharp as a blade without raising his voice. If you have a problem with the government, take it to court. But if you have a problem with my family, I can't help you with that. A simple, controlled reply, yet a clear shutdown. The woman let out a loud, mocking laugh. "The court?" he scoffed, shaking her head as if Barron had just told a joke. "This little Trumpy actually thinks we don't know the truth. You own the court." Her laughter echoed through the café, fueling the growing tension. She turned to the crowd, throwing her hands up dramatically. "These guys have been using our country to crush us for years. Maybe it's time people wake up and see why America is never safe in the hands of the Democrats." Her voice grew louder. Her words meant to rally those around him. She wasn't just provoking Barron anymore. She was turning the moment into a spectacle. For Barron, this had gone far enough. It was time to shut her down for good. He slowly rose from his seat, his movements calm but deliberate. The café fell into a hushed anticipation. With a steady gaze, he asked, "What's your name?" The woman smirked, crossing her arms. "Jenny," she answered without hesitation. Barron's eyes narrowed slightly. He had heard that name before. His father had mentioned a liberal writer constantly attacking their family in the media. But to Barron, that didn't matter now. He wasn't here for politics. This time, he decided to bury the hatchet himself. "All right, Jenny," Barron said, his tone level but firm. "What do you think we did wrong?" Jenny leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing, her lips curling in a smirk that barely masked her hostility. Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "You really want to know?" she scoffed, tilting her head like she was studying an exhibit in a museum. Her voice rose just enough for the crowd to hear. "All right, tell me this. Why does your family act like they own this country?" Barron remained still, his expression unreadable. He folded his arms, his posture relaxed but firm, like a man who had been through this before. "We don't," he said evenly. "We just refuse to let it fall apart." Jenny let out a dry chuckle, her head as if she'd just heard the biggest joke of the century. "Fall apart?" she repeated mockingly. "You mean taking away people's rights, shutting down voices that don't agree with you?" Barron leaned back slightly, drumming his fingers on the table, his expression unreadable. He let the words linger in the air before gesturing subtly around the café. "You're here, calling my family tyrants, yet speaking freely without consequence." His mouth curled into a small, amused smile. "Seems like your voice is doing just fine." A murmur spread through the room, some nodding in quiet agreement, others exchanging glances. The contradiction was hard to ignore. Jenny scoffed, shifting her weight uncomfortably. "That's not the point," Barron raised an eyebrow. Isn't it? You claim we shut down voices, yet yours is the loudest one in the room. He took a slow sip of his coffee, his eyes locked onto Jenny. You don't want a debate. You want an audience. The words hit their mark. Jenny's jaw tensed, her fingers curling into fists at her sides. The cafe had gone completely silent now, all eyes flicking between the two, waiting to see how she would respond. A low murmur passed through the cafe. A few heads nodded subtly. Others leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Jenny's jaw tightened for a moment, but she pressed on. Her voice grew sharper, more direct. Okay, what about the tax cuts? She jabbed a finger toward the Baron. Your dad made the rich richer and left the rest of us struggling. Barron smirked, his eyes flicking to the overpriced menu hanging above the counter. He gestured toward Jenny's table with a slight nod. You're in a cafe, drinking a $5 coffee, he said smoothly. Doesn't look like you're struggling too much. A few chuckles rippled through the room. A barista behind the counter smirked but quickly looked away. Jenny scoffed, trying to wave it off. Deflecting, classic. She leaned in again, this time with more force, as if trying to intimidate. Tell me this, Trump. Why does your dad hate immigrants? Barron's expression changed in an instant. The playful smirk vanished, replaced by something sharper, controlled but cutting. Hate immigrants? His voice was quieter now, but somehow more powerful. My mother is an immigrant. My grandfather was an immigrant. What he hates is illegal immigration. There's a difference. Jenny rolled her eyes dramatically. And locking kids in cages? That's just policy too, right? Her words were laced with venom, hoping to provoke a reaction. Barron's gaze didn't waver. Those cages, he said, voice steady, built during the Obama administration, but you didn't care back then, did you? A few gasps rippled through the cafe. The once distant onlookers were now fully engaged, their eyes darting between the two like spectators at a boxing match. Jenny hesitated, her lips parting, but no words came out. The energy in the room shifted. The silence was deafening. Barron stepped forward just slightly, closing the gap between them. His presence alone seemed to push Jenny back. You hate my family. Fine, Barron said, his voice low but unwavering. But at least get your facts straight. Jenny clenched her fists, her face flushed. The confidence she had walked in with was cracking. She sucked in a breath, her last desperate attempt to regain control. Your father is a fraud, a con man, and you're just another spoiled rich kid defending him. Barron exhaled slowly, setting his coffee down with deliberate care. He locked eyes with Jenny, unblinking, unreadable. Then, with a calm that cut deeper than any insult, he said, I don't need to defend him. History will do that for me. The weight of Barron's words lingered, but Jenny wasn't ready to back down just yet. She let out a short laugh, masking her frustration. Nice speech, kid, but your family still treats this country like a business. Profits first, people last. Barron picked up his coffee, taking a slow sip before replying. A business thrives on results. Low unemployment, a booming market. People did better, whether they admit it or not. Jenny scoffed. For the rich, maybe. Barron leaned forward slightly. For everyone. Wages rose, small businesses grew. But sure, let's call that a bad thing. Jenny opened her mouth to argue, but hesitated. She knew the numbers. She'd seen them. Still, she clenched her fists. What about the division? Your dad thrived on it. Turned Americans against each other. Barron met her gaze, unwavering. Or maybe he just made people say out loud what they always believed. The division was always there, you just didn't want to see it. The cafe was dead silent now. Even those who had chuckled earlier now watched with a new intensity. Jenny glanced around, noticing how many were nodding, considering Barron's words. Her confidence wavered. She wanted to fire back, to land a final blow. But for the first time, she felt it, the slow realization creeping in. She wasn't winning this. With a sharp inhale, she shook her head. Whatever. Believe what you want. Barron smirked, picking up his coffee again. I don't need you to believe me. Just don't lie to yourself. Jenny let out a slow breath, her confidence wavering. She searched for another counterattack, something sharp enough to regain control, but nothing came. Around her, the murmurs of the onlookers weren't just amusement anymore. Some nodded, others exchanged glances, as if weighing Barron's words themselves. Her fingers tapped against the table, restless. So, what? You think your family is perfect? That you've never done anything wrong? Her voice was quieter now, but still grasping for something, anything to hold on to. Barron didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply met Jenny's gaze with an unwavering calm. No leader is perfect. No family is either. But ask yourself, have you questioned everything, or just the things you were told to? Jenny swallowed. That question landed differently. She had spent years believing she was on the right side of history, that she was standing against corruption, against tyranny. But now, for the first time, she wasn't sure if she had ever really questioned her own perspective. Her jaw clenched, then relaxed. She looked away for a moment, exhaling. I don't agree with everything your dad did, she admitted, her voice lacking its earlier fire. But maybe I haven't looked at everything as clearly as I thought. Barron leaned in slightly. That's all I want. Not for you to agree with me, not to defend my family, just think for yourself. Jenny sat back, the weight of that challenge settling in. She had come here expecting to crush a spoiled rich kid with her words, to expose arrogance and privilege. Instead, she found herself staring at the cracks in her own certainty. The cafe, once thick with tension, now felt different. The debate hadn't ended in a knockout punch, but in something far more unsettling, a shift. Barron hadn't just won an argument. Barron glanced at his watch, then picked up his coffee, taking one last sip before setting it down. He didn't offer a final remark, no smug victory lap, just a small nod, almost as if to say, think about it. The weight of the conversation lingered, not in loud declarations, but in the quiet spaces between words left unsaid. Then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. The bell above jingled as he stepped out, sunlight spilling in behind him, casting a long shadow that stretched across the floor, one that Jenny and the others couldn't ignore. Barron didn't look back. No triumphant smirk, no parting words. Just a quiet exit, leaving behind a room full of people who, for the first time in a long time, weren't so sure they had all the answers. If this story struck a chord, there's more to explore. Tap the video on your screen for another powerful tale of courage, conviction, and unexpected moments that change everything. Your next eye-opening journey starts now. Don't miss it.